Hello there, you're watching Nightline. I'm Anita Wu. News making the headlines. Datuk Sri Azmin Ali to officiate PKR's Youth and Women's Wing National Congresses. And US's House Intelligence Committee finds Donald Trump guilty for abuse of power. Our headlining story, PKR Deputy President Datuk Sri Muhammad Azmin Ali will officiate the party's Youth Congress on December 6th and the PKR Women's Wing National Congress a day earlier. In making the announcement, PKR Communications Director Fahmi Fazil said the decision was made after a special political bureau meeting involving leaders aligned to Datuk Sri Azmin and PKR President Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim took place in Parliament on Wednesday. He also said that the Youth and Women's Wing Congress will be closed by Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Sri Dr. Wan Azizah Wan Ismail. Asked if there was peace in the party following mounting speculation of strained ties between leaders aligned to the respective factions of Datuk Sri Azmin and Datuk Sri Anwar, Fahmi merely stressed that PKR will become stronger following the meeting and the unity that will be shown in the upcoming National Congress. Fahmi also said there will be no parallel Congress being held at the same time as PKR's National Congress, following talk of such gatherings, which was said to be led by leaders aligned to Datuk Sri Azmin's faction. Previously, Datuk Sri Azmin was dropped from opening the PKR Youth Congress on December 6th, as Datuk Sri Dr. Wan Azizah, who is the PKR Advisory Council Chief, would launch it instead. It triggered outcry from leaders aligned with Datuk Sri Azmin's faction, where several leaders in PKR Youth have signed a joint statement condemning Party Secretary-General Datuk Sri Saifuddin Nasution for triggering a leadership crisis. Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has called on Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC member economies to embrace the shared prosperity philosophy and include it in their current economic model. Malaysia, which will play host to APEC 2020, he said, had chosen the theme Optimising Human Potential Towards a Future of Shared Prosperity for next year's gathering, which indicated the importance of shared prosperity philosophy. The country had recently launched the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030 with the aim of creating an economy that can achieve balanced and sustainable growth, along with fair and equitable wealth distribution across income groups, ethnicities, geographical regions and supply chains.
In this regard, as host of APEC 2020, Malaysia will continue the work on women in the economy, financial inclusion, engaging youth, sustainable development, and creating a conducive environment for entrepreneurs, startups, and social enterprises, as well as all these elements are critical components of a system that will contribute to shared prosperity.
Tun Dr. Mahathir said this in his speech during the launching of APEC 2020 in Cyberjaya on Wednesday. More importantly, he said, Malaysia would like to see the concept of shared prosperity driving the post-2020 vision for APEC, and the philosophy cascades to every work that APEC undertakes moving forward beyond Bogor goals. The Prime Minister said, as the host of APEC 2020, Malaysia will continue the work on women in the economy, financial inclusion, engaging youth and sustainable development. Speaking to the media after the launching ceremony, Tun Dr. Mahathir said Malaysia is of the opinion that it is not necessary to hold the APEC meeting in the United States in January next year. He said such an opinion was shared by most of the APEC nation members.
I think it was not necessary in the first place. Chile has actually done a good deal of work in their preparation, and nobody else can do 1 year's work like Chile. And if you have just a meeting called impromptu meeting called, so that is why we decided that it was not necessary.
Malaysia was reported to have disagreed with Washington's proposal to hold the APEC leaders meeting in the US in January next year. Foreign Minister Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah was quoted as saying that US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had called him when they were in Bangkok to ask for Malaysia's position on the matter, since Chile was not able to host it. Chile had cancelled the APEC leaders meeting following street protests in the country. More than 2 decades ago in 1998, Cyberjaya, which was known then as the country's multimedia super corridor, hosted the APEC 1998 leaders meeting. During that time, Cyberjaya was just at the beginning of its development phase and was still new to the foreign investors. To mark Cyberjaya as the location for Malaysia's first APEC summit, one of the main roads in Cyberjaya was named Persiaran APEC. Today, the 22-year-old Cyberjaya was thrust into the limelight again by playing host to the official launch of APEC 2020 Malaysia. The similarities between the two events were obvious, as both happened under the leadership of Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, who was then the 4th Prime Minister and is now the country's 7th Prime Minister.
Well, I'm glad to have an opportunity to host for the second time. It takes 22 years before you can be the host the second time. So we find that over the years, we have learned a lot about trade, particularly with regard to free trade. When we talk about free trade, we should not just think about being free, but also equitability as between the partners in the free trade.
The year 2020, according to him, is indeed a significant year for APEC, as it marks the end of the Bogor Goals, which was idealized in 1994 and had been progressively pursued by member nations since. Set up in 1989, APEC operated as a multilateral trade and economic cooperation forum for 21 member economies aimed at boosting prosperity by encouraging a balanced, inclusive, sustainable, innovative and guaranteed growth by speeding up regional economic integration. The proposed joint billing for Water Supply and Indah Water Consortium (IWK) sewerage services will not result in tariff increase. Water, Land and Natural Resources Minister Dr. Xavier Jayakumar said the move would facilitate the payment process, as customers would receive and pay only one bill for both services.
Kerajaan Persekutuan subsidi kepada IWK dekat 150 juta ringgit setahun. Tanpa subsidi itu, kita akan adakan masalah perkhidmatan di dalam syarikat IWK. Tetapi kita telah ambil tindakan-tindakan sewajarnya di dalam tempoh 5 tahun yang akan datang. Kita akan adakan beberapa program di mana subsidi ini akan menurunkan. Kita akan berhentikan pemberian subsidi dari kementerian kepada IWK sebab projek dan program yang kita telah atur di dalam 5 tahun ini akan lihat bahawa IWK akan jadi financially independent.
Dr. Xavier said this in reply to a question from Nibong Tebal MP Datuk Mansor Othman, who wanted to know the extent of the government's efforts to integrate the water supply bill with the IWK sewerage bill and its effect on the government and the people. He said the implementation of the Integrated Bill Pilot Project, which was introduced in the Federal Territory of Labuan effective March 1, 2016, had a positive impact on IWK. Following the implementation of integrated billing in Labuan, the ministry's initiative will be extended to other states by holding discussions with state water supply operators. E-hailing drivers who have failed the test to obtain a passenger service vehicle or PSV licence more than 3 times will be given a special verbal version of the test. Transport Minister Anthony Loke Siu Fook said this is part of the government's efforts to assist e-hailing drivers to obtain the licence.
Walaupun mereka gagal, mereka boleh menduduki semula peperiksaan untuk PSV ini dari masa ke semasa. Dan memang hasrat kita ialah untuk melesenkan mereka, dan kita harap pemandu-pemandu ini diberikan lesen PSV supaya mereka boleh terus memandu sebagai pemandu e-hailing secara sah. Untuk pemandu-pemandu yang telah gagal lebih daripada 3 kali, kita akan memberikan sistem peperiksaan khusus kepada mereka. Ada di kalangan mereka mungkin dari segi pemahaman, dari segi bacaan, mereka mungkin kurang sedikit. Kita mungkin memberikan peperiksaan secara lisan.
He was responding to a question in the Dewan Rakyat on Wednesday about the government's efforts to assist e-hailing drivers who have failed to obtain a PSV licence. Lok said there were 358,944 active PSV licences, which includes e-hailing, bus and taxi drivers. He also said that taxi drivers make up 28,860 of those who have PSV licences. The former Chief Executive Officer of SRC International Sendirian Berhad, Nik Faisal Arif Kamil, played both sides, leading to the company being ripped off. In making the statement, Datuk Sri Muhammad Najib Tun Razak said Nik Faisal told SRC Board of Directors one thing and told him another when the latter briefed him about happenings in the company. Testifying in his defence in the SRC International trial on Wednesday, Datuk Sri Najib said he was never involved in micromanaging any of Ministry of Finance Inc. companies, including SRC International. He also expressed shock that the company's top management, including its chairman, Tan Sri Ismi Ismail, had never bothered to verify things but blindly followed whatever was told to him by Nik Faisal. During the course of his testimony, Datuk Sri Najib also touched on the donation which was banked into his personal accounts and later returned to the Saudi royal family. The former Barisan Nasional chairman said he had instructed former Principal Private Secretary, the late Dato' Azlin Alias, to return a huge sum of the unused donation to Tanor Finance Corporation in 2013. He said $620 million was returned to the corporation because fugitive businessman Low Tek Joe, or better known as Joe Low, had confirmed that the Saudi royalty wanted it to be banked in there. On the management of his personal banking account, Datuk Sri Najib explained that he was forced to appoint an authorised person to handle it because he was tied up with his official duties as Prime Minister, Finance Minister, UMNO President and Barisan Nasional Chairman at the time. The Pekan MP will continue his testimony before High Court Judge Muhammad Nazlan Muhammad Ghazali on Monday. The Kuala Lumpur High Court on Wednesday heard that former Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Sri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi took 4 types of insurance policies totalling 44,611 ringgit for 12 of his private-owned vehicles. Allianz General Insurance Branch Manager Fang Swat Lim said the 4 policies, private car policy, motorcycle policy, enhanced road warrior policy and bike warrior policy, were for 7 luxury brand cars, 5 high-powered motorcycles and a classic motorcycle. Fang testified that the policies were registered under Datuk Sri Zahid's name, that of his wife Datin Sri Hamidah Khamis, and their children Nurul Izwani, Nurul Hidayah and Ahmad Shafiq Haziq. The 13th prosecution witness said the policies for the vehicles were valued between 151 ringgit and 75 sen and 8,110 ringgit and 75 sen. Based on Allianz's records, Fang said the beneficiaries for the 2 motorcycle-related insurance policy categories are Datuk Sri Zahid, his wife Datin Sri Hamidah and his daughter Nurul Hidayah. She explained that the private car policy is a common insurance service for private car owners, while the motorcycle policy is a standard one for private motorcycle owners. The enhanced road warrior policy, meanwhile, provides customers with towing services for their cars in the event the car is damaged. It is also to provide protection if an accident occurs and the driver or passengers sustain injuries. The trial continues before Judge Colin Lawrence Sekera on Thursday. The flood situation affecting the east coast, especially Kelantan and Terengganu, is showing a positive development when flood evacuees in both states decreased in the evening. In Kelantan, the overall situation improved when the total number of flood victims placed at the Flood Relief Centre, PPS, slightly dropped to 12,269 people compared to 12,303 people on Wednesday afternoon. The Info Bencana JKM application also showed the number of evacuees across 34 centres decreased, except for in Tumpat district, which saw an increase of 3,074 people compared to 2,779 people in 7 PPS. Over in Terengganu, the flood situation improved as only 3 districts were flooded, with 9 relief centres still operating, housing 945 people compared to 1,164 people in 14 centres Wednesday afternoon. Next on Nightline, latest updates from the Cradle Fund CEO murder trial. Don't go away. Welcome back. Still on Nightline. The peaceful transition of power without violence proves that the parliamentary democratic system and constitutional democracy practiced in Malaysia all this while works. Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad said Malaysia's 60-year-old parliament continues to endure as an institution and democratic symbol that represents the voice and power of the people. He said even though there was a change in parties that heads the government, the first since independence, the tradition and democratic traditions have been carried out and defended. Tun Dr. Mahathir was speaking during the banquet for the Diamond Jubilee of Malaysia's Parliament on Wednesday night. Also present was Tun Dr. Siti Hasmah Muhammad Ali, Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Wan Azizah Ismail and members of the opposition. The Shah Alam High Court heard on Wednesday that there were signs the fire in the bedroom of former Cradle Fund CEO Nazrin Hassan on June 14th last year was started intentionally. Fire and Rescue Department Fire Investigating Officer Abdul Halim Zulkifli testified that the fire was only concentrated in certain areas of the room. The 15th witness was giving his testimony in Nazrin's murder trial, where his wife, 2 teens and an Indonesian woman was still at large, has been charged with his murder. Abdul Halim explained that if the fire was deliberately started, it would only be done in a planned place. He also testified that there were some flammable materials, including a pile of papers and tissue rolls, placed near the victim and the bed, which did not burn. The victim's body was not fully burned, but there were certain parts of his body that were burnt. The witness told the court that in a deliberate fire incident, usually an agent or tool, such as fuel, would be used to spark the fire. When samples from the burnt area were taken, the results showed that there was petrol. In Malacca, a 60-year-old was charged at the Uighur Magistrates Court with 2 counts of uttering lewd words and caressing his own relative. Muhammad Fuzi Syukur claimed trial when the charges were read out to him before Magistrate Teo Shu Yi. The court granted bail of 3,000 ringgit and fixed February 11th for mention. Over in Perak, a fake money-lending syndicate was busted by police with the arrest of 13 people at 2 condominium units in Ipoh last month. Officials said 12 local men and a woman between the ages of 24 and 34 were arrested in a joint operation with the Bukit Aman JSJK Operations Division at around 2 p.m. Tuesday. Police also seized 27 mobile phones and documents containing a list of telephone numbers and victims' information during the raid. All the suspects were taken to Ipoh Magistrates Court on Wednesday morning for remand, and the case is being investigated under Section 420 of the Penal Code for fraud. Johor police have busted an international online gambling syndicate believed to have raked in R1 million worth of profits following a raid at a bungalow in Taman Bukit Kempas. Officials said the syndicate is run by 13 Chinese nationals and have been operating for the past 2 months. All those detained are between the ages of 18 to 44 years old. During the operation, police also confiscated 7 computer sets, 35 smartphones and several devices used for online gambling. The case is being investigated under the Common Gaming Houses Act. In Pahang, a motorcyclist died after he was rammed by a 4-wheel drive at a traffic light junction in Kuantan Wednesday morning. The traffic light was said to be faulty when the accident occurred. The victim, Sulong Hussein, 70, was unable to avoid the oncoming vehicle and was pronounced dead at the location. The driver of the 4-wheel drive, meanwhile, escaped unhurt. Next on Nightline, anger in China as U.S. House passes Uighur crackdown bill. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Onto the foreign front. The U.S. House Intelligence Committee has released its impeachment report against President Donald Trump on Tuesday. The report lays out the panel's case to impeach Trump and detailed the fact that Trump had solicited the interference of a foreign government, Ukraine, to benefit his re-election.
This report chronicles a scheme by the President of the United States to coerce an ally, Ukraine, that is at war with an adversary, Russia, into doing the President's political dirty work. It involves a scheme in which Donald Trump withheld official acts, a White House meeting, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars of needed military assistance in order to compel that power to deliver 2 investigations that he believed would assist his re-election campaign.
Schiff said the committee would continue its investigation after the release of its report and while the Judiciary panel did its work. The Democratic-controlled committee, which has spearheaded the impeachment probe that formally began in September after a whistleblower's complaint, is scheduled to meet at 6 p.m. local time to vote on its findings. The matter will go to the House Judiciary Committee, which will open its proceedings on Wednesday. Republicans, in an advance rebuttal report released on Monday, meanwhile, said Democrats had not established that Trump had committed an impeachable offense. On another note, China has reacted angrily after the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill requiring the Trump administration to toughen its response to Xinjiang, where the more than 1 million Muslims, mostly ethnic Uyghurs, are being held in re-education camps. In a statement released shortly after the Uighur Act of 2019 was passed, China's foreign ministry on Wednesday condemned the move, saying the bill wantonly smears China's efforts to eliminate and combat extremism. Earlier, the United States lower house voted to back the bill 407-1. The Uighur Act of 2019 is a stronger version of a bill that angered Beijing when it passed the Senate in September and calls on Trump to impose sanctions for the first time on a member of China's powerful Politburo, even as he attempts to reach a deal with Beijing to end a damaging trade war. The bill requires the U.S. president to condemn abuses against Muslims and call for the closure of the camps in the country's far western region.
Given that this year is the 30th anniversary of the...
Whereas in Sudan, at least 23 people have been killed in Khartoum after a fire triggered by an explosion tore through a ceramics factory. Officials said the fire came after a gas tanker exploded while unloading its shipment at the factory, adding that the blast was so powerful it blew the tanker into a nearby lot. The blaze also injured nearly 130 people, several critically, with the death toll from the fire expected to rise as the burnt were being treated at local hospitals. It was not immediately clear what caused the explosion. Preliminary observations, however, indicate a lack of necessary safety measures and equipment at the factory, in addition to random storage of flammable materials. Young Tigers crash out of the SEA Games. Do stay tuned. We're back with sports news now. The 30th SEA Games. The national under-23 football team failed to qualify to the semi-finals following a humiliating 1-3 defeat to Cambodia in their final Group A match on Wednesday. The opening goal came 5 minutes after the break when Inso David struck a first-time shot following goalkeeper Haziq Nazli's poor clearance from a corner kick. 16-year-old Seng Chanthia then added the second for the Cambodians a minute later with a brilliant solo effort before Kyo Sok Peng added the icing on the cake as he scored the third goal 8 minutes after the hour mark. Malaysia pulled one back through substitute Quentin Cheng in the 89th minute, but it was already too late to mount a comeback for Dato' Ong Kim Suing boys. Following the result, Cambodia joined Myanmar in the semi-finals, while Malaysia finished the group fourth with 4 points. On the bright side, the Malaysian contingent added 3 more gold medals on the 4th day of the Games, bringing Malaysia's gold medal tally to a total of 21 so far. National gymnast queen Farah Ann Abdul Hadi was the main highlight of the day as she scooped her 3rd gold medal in the Games. The 25-year-old ended her 30th SEA Games campaign in style after she won the floor exercise gold medal by scoring 12.600 points. Asian Games silver medalist Rifda Irfana Lutfi won silver by scoring 12.333 points, while Tran Duan Queen Nam for Vietnam settled for bronze. Also contributing gold was another national gymnast, Tracy Ang, who took the gold in the women's balanced beam event. The 26-year-old scored 12.867 points to pip Indonesia's Rifda Irfana Lutfi and Vietnam's Do Thi Van An. Earlier in the day, the national lawn bowls squad scooped another gold medal through the men's fours event. The men's team, comprising Muhammad Idham Amin, Dain Dadiri Dahasri, Zulhilmi Rezwan and Farul Izwan Abdul Muin took the gold after recording a comfortable 24-6 win over Brunei after 13 ends. The women's team, however, could only settle with bronze after beating the Brunei team 17-15. Following the results, the national lawn bowls squad ended their SEA Games campaign on an excellent note after winning 4 gold medals and 2 bronze medals.